Two to go. So in the next section, I just want to talk a little bit about what is appropriate behavior and the evaluations, just to give some time for this to mark and find the section later if needed. For appropriate behavior is professionalism. I shouldn't have to explain that in too much detail. Professionalism is how would you want to be treated? How would you want your family members to be treated? How do you expect to be treated when you're in working at a clinical site? You can't have unprofessional behavior toward the staff and the patients and expect better responses toward you. So a couple different things. I mentioned already, you have to have a preceptor with you whenever you're performing any invasive skills. The first day or two at a site, it's not a bad idea to have a preceptor with you anytime you're in working with a patient. If there's a gender difference between you and the patient, that's always a good idea to have somebody have another person in there with you. So the family is not necessarily going to be your friend or your ally under those circumstances. So if I'm putting an ECG on someone, generally speaking, that's a fairly non-invasive skill you're putting stickies on, but there are people who have severe allergies to different types of adhesive, and if they have reactions to that, it's nice to have somebody else that was there monitoring and watching what's going on in there. When you're starting IVs, obviously you have to have a preceptor there. As I mentioned earlier, you can get everything ready. You can find your site. Be careful with probing if you've got somebody that's got sensitive skin or bleeding disorders. But tourniquets are a little risky, but not terribly risky. You can find your site, you can get everything ready, and before you stick a needle into somebody, let alone pushing any medications, make sure that you've got another preceptor with you that's there watching you, not just standing at the doorway looking down the hall. So they need to monitor what you're doing with those skills. If you run into problems, let me know, or let Chuck know, or let your clinical instructor or your lecture instructor or your lab instructors know, and we'll investigate. If you have a really uncomfortable situation, you're absolutely within your rights to leave at any point in time. Just say, hey, I had an emergency came up, I'm going to have to leave, thanks, and just walk out. And quite often we can resolve that pretty quick and easily. Likewise, as I've said, the sites have the right to do the same with you. They can dismiss you if you're doing something inappropriate and it just comes across wrong, and they want to get it investigated before they have you back into that site. It's most of the time it's a minor misunderstanding. It's very easy to resolve. I can tell you every single site that we have has had the glowing reviews that they are the best place on the planet to go and do your clinical, and every single site that we have on our list has had comments back that, oh, that's not where you want to go. Boy, they were really obnoxious. They didn't let me do anything, and they were mean. And quite often, if you get somebody that's gristly or grumbly at you, you'll find out that your behavior while you were there wasn't quite up to par. That's not always true. Sometimes you can go in and be the most respectful person on the planet and get just a lousy experience. They're people too. Preceptors are family, have families and emergencies and stuff that's going on wrong. Maybe they got a bad cup of coffee. Maybe they had a death in the family. Maybe their puppy or kitty is ill, or their kid is ill, or they're ill, or something else is happening. So give them the benefit of the doubt, work through it, and if it becomes too much, then leave. Couple things as far as appropriate behavior. If you ever feel unsafe or harassed in any form, that's time to leave. In the field settings, occasionally there's TV shows and things that are on. Now, I've mentioned Game of Thrones in the past. Now, there are fire departments where in the evenings they may watch an episode of Game of Thrones. There's one thing about if they're watching an episode of Game of Thrones up in a break room and you're invited to join them but not required to join them, you can sit down in the watch office or something where they're not watching that, and you can avoid it through there. If they're giving you a hard time because you're not watching it, then that's appropriate for you to leave. If there's anything that's making you feel uncomfortable, then just excuse yourself and say, thank you, I need to head out. I just got a message, I need to leave. And the message could be from me that said you should leave because it's an inappropriate thing. If, on the other hand, they're asking you, oh, you have to come in there and watch this, then yes, by all means, that's inappropriate. If you want to, that's okay. There are differences now. If there are some places where if they're watching something really wild like that, they may not, the bosses may not be quite as happy about that. So as I said, if you're in doubt, feel free to contact one of us and let us know, and we'll check into it for you, and we'll kind of talk you through, and we'll find out what's going on, because we want to make this a safe and comfortable experience for you. Another example is if you have a crew that's doing house duties. I've worked at Dayton, so I'm familiar with their process, but it applies to most departments. If they're out there and they're washing the medic, it doesn't hurt to grab a brush and start washing the medic along with them and hosing it off and do everything. They shouldn't be dumping buckets of water and soap and stuff on you or doing silly things like that. They know that, and they usually won't. If you're not an employee of that department and going along with normal things at that department. But they shouldn't be doing anything that's inappropriate. If they tell you to go out and inspect the medic or change the oil or change a tire or change an oxygen cylinder or wash the medic by yourself, time to leave. That's not appropriate behavior for you. Dayton quite often has things where they'll play a game called 3-coin, or they'll throw darts to see who does the dishes. And I can tell you that 99.9% of the time, students are exempt from that. They're not going to have you doing it. They would rather you not doing it in the first place. But if you want to say, hey, I'm part of this, I'll go ahead and throw darts. And especially quite often they'll have 2 people working on it, and you lose. In good nature, you're going to jump in and do that. You'll find other people come and help you. If it's working as a part of a crew, that's appropriate stuff. So helping. It's usually not required, and they don't get mad if you don't, but I can tell you it goes a long way towards your professionalism if you look like you're there to help. Likewise, if a nurse comes up to you and says, hey, well, 26 needs an IV. Come on down, I got to ask him some questions, you can start an IV. It's like, oh no, I've got all 50 of my IVs, or I've got all 40 of my IVs, I don't need any more. Well, you're not an expert at 40. I'll be honest, with IVs, we normally have people over 100. So keep going. And the more skills you get, the more points you get. So you're there to do whatever's available, not just your final skills. Don't just hang out at the nurse's station. Don't ignore preceptors who are trying to help you get skills on there. And treat everybody in a professional manner. Your instructors will catch any major issues when they're there working with you. So just briefly to kind of touch base and talk about the evaluation periods. Every couple of weeks in the hospital, you'll have 4 sessions throughout the hospital. If it's split, you might have 2 in 2136 and 2 in 2137. But you have them every couple of weeks where you're there, and the instructors will see how you're doing. They usually have 2 different students. And if I'm at the hospital, I'll have one that's at the North Station and one's the East Station at Miami Valley Hospital. And I'll follow them around, and I'll walk with one for a little bit, then I'll run over and catch the other one. They're getting ready to start an IV, so then I'll come back to you. And we'll talk through what paperwork you need to do. I'll look at your run sheets that you've done. We'll talk over any of the clinical requirements. It's really a good idea to have good contact information for one another on there, because emergencies do come up if you get platooned or if you get sick. Changing your schedule online is not going to work. As I said, you're going to have to change your faculty sessions directly with the faculty. But kind of help talk you through perfecting your techniques and discuss what you've done since the last evaluation. Make sure that you're on track. Make sure everything's ready to go. Those do count in toward your grade as well. So you want to show a professional attitude when you're working in there. And if you're scheduled at a hospital, you don't have to go to the hospital where the instructor is at any time other than your evaluation periods. So for example, if your instructor's at Miami Valley and you don't like Miami Valley, it's too hard to get to in Park, you want to go to Kettering instead, or you want to go to Atrium or whatever, you can do all your other stuff at other hospitals. I do tend to recommend, especially before a final evaluation, that you go and ride. If you're in the field segment on there, as I said, everything will be done with an instructor at Dayton Fire Department. So if you're not a big fan of Dayton Fire, that's fine. You don't have to ride there. They're busy, but there's other busy departments. Harrison's busy. Trotwood tends to be kind of busy. And there's others. Like I said, Huber's not bad. They're a really good experience. They're not quite as busy. But there's great places all over the area. So feel free to ride where you'd like. But it's not a bad idea to go to the station and the crew that you're going to be working with. So they work every third day. Work back 3 days, 6 days, 9 days, 12 days in advance and schedule a shift with that crew and just get familiar with where the bathroom is, where the stuff is on the medic before you come in for your evaluation. The instructor can show you around, the preceptors will show you around, but it's nice to have some of that knocked out because I will tell you for the evaluation stuff, if we get in and we get our run done early, we can finish early. So anything you do with your instructor counts toward your skills. So that 4-hour shift counts as 4 hours of time that you're there with the instructor. IVs you start, runs that you go on, medications you push, patient care reports, all of it count toward your skills. If you have questions, once again, your clinical instructor is your primary source.